Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Derby preview for the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby. If you're listening to this via podcast form, congrats on making it this far because I've already made it through the Kansas preview for the Cup race this weekend, and now we're getting into something a little bit different. If you're watching this via YouTube, well, thank you for finding me on here because I am not typically a horse racing expert. I get into NASCAR gambling week to week on the Full Tank with Phil podcast, but this week I cannot resist. Every year, it's kind of been a tradition that we jump into the odds for the Kentucky Derby, and this year is no different. I am fired up. For those of you who can't see me listening to this on the podcast form, I am dressed to impress for the Derby. I've got, my hat on, old school hat, trying to get into that Derby spirit. So, on this segment of the podcast, what we're going to be doing is talking about just kind of getting into the prereqs for the Derby, some thoughts, some news, some notes on what to expect this weekend, and then start looking at some horses. We're going to dive through the whole field quickly, just talk about the odds, and then specifically point out really detailed things about each horse that I feel like it's worth calling out. So I want to start just by saying, and I said this a second ago, I am not a touted horse racing expert. What I've done over the last week or so, really like 5 days, is just try to absorb as much content as I possibly can because I love gambling on the Kentucky Derby, but also I like kind of forming my own opinions and jotting notes down. I've got a whole, page here for anyone who cares. And I'm trying to just kind of aggregate all the information that I've seen from various people out there. And we'll talk about kind of who those are, who those people are when we get to the certain facts that we're going to dive into here. But I'd like to try to aggregate it all and then put it back out there in a way that someone who listens to this podcast on a regular basis into NASCAR gambling could potentially understand and follow along with and have a little bit of fun this weekend at the Derby. I mean, we know NASCAR fans, NASCAR gambling fans know that that's kind of a niche thing. And maybe it's like off the beaten trail for your typical sports gambler. Well, trying to introduce the horse racing element to it as well for those people. So that's really what we're getting into this week. Now, I find that this race, everybody seems to agree, this race coming up on Saturday, May 6th, right about 6:45 will be when they go off. A little bit after that, maybe. But get in front of your televisions for that. This race, more than most that we've seen in the past, is kind of wide open. Like for NASCAR gamblers out there, I kind of feel like we could compare this a little bit to the super speedways. Kind of not really a heavy favorite in the field as far as the stats go. Now, as far as the odds go, there is one. And we'll talk about him. But the point being, from everybody that I've listened to so far, it really seems like it's a wide open field, more so than we've seen in the past. There's not your dominant guy, dominant horse out there that's expected to win. And that makes it a lot more fun this week trying to talk about who to take. So you might be able to find some value further down, just like we talk about when we get into Talladega and Daytona each time. So the thing about it is, though, when you dive into a horse, you're going to find the pros and you're going to find the cons for every horse. There's not a horse that you can find in the field this week that is just surefire. There's everything right, nothing wrong. So you kind of have to weigh your options and see, is that con for that horse something that I'm willing to, accept and roll with? So we're going to talk about that when we get into it. Now, last year, we had a super, super underdog horse won the race in Rich Strike, and he was not even in the race when they did the post draw on Monday or Tuesday of that week. He was the extra horse, and then one of the horses got scratched. Rich Strike came in, wins the race. I think he was like 88-1. Takes down Zandon, who was a heavy favorite, and there was another one that I can't think of at the moment. But that is setting things up differently this time around because that's fresh in everybody's mind. Everybody's saying, "Hey, if Rich Strike can do it at 88-1, why not take a shot on all these guys? So the odds that you're seeing here, you're not seeing anything past 50 as far as the morning line odds are concerned. And I think the books are kind of keeping that fresh in their minds because they know that people are going to be willing to take a shot on a horse for no reason other than just he's the longest shot horse that they have out there. So that's going to play a factor as the week goes on that, we're going to see odds change a little bit and see how the betting public goes. Now, for the NASCAR fans out there, NASCAR gambling fans, the way this works, just as a reminder, is not like NASCAR, right? So when we talk on the podcast every week saying, hey, I like X driver at 14-1, get them now while you can. That's not the case in horse racing. It's whatever, unless you're shooting in like an offshore book, like Bovada or something like that, where you can get them and lock them in. The horse racing books, which there have been more of, Twin Spires, FanDuel, and DraftKings are all now available in a lot of different states. They go off of what the horse's odds are at the time when they take off. So if you have a horse that you like and he's further down, maybe he's 30-1, if the betting public starts to hammer that horse, you're going to get him not at 30-1, but wherever he ends up going off at when the race starts. So that's just a reminder to anyone in case you bet a horse at 12-1 and then he's 6-1. Like, what the hell's going on here? Why am I getting paid out? That's the reason why. So just needed to call that out because I know that most people listening to this podcast are not used to that style of betting. And I'll be honest, it takes me by surprise a little bit each year that we get into the Triple Crown because, I'm, like I said, not into horse racing throughout the season. I try to follow along with some of our Twitter friends out there, as we'll touch on. Emily from Optics EQ was our guest last year for the Derby. We're going to try to get her on for maybe one of the other Triple Crown races, but Triple Crown is really where, most gambling fans, that's what makes it so big each year, is that these three races, mean everything. And it's what the 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds are striving to get to. So, the fact that, the long shot won last year and this year coming in with no dominant horse really feels like it's a recipe for some fun stuff this year when we get into it. So I've got some slides here that we're going to dig into as we start breaking down this for anyone who's watching on YouTube here. And, I tried my best to get all this information. People that I, was listening to, obviously, Emily, she was our guest last year. Her and her partner, John Doyle, they put out a great statistical breakdown. It was a week from Thursday. We didn't have the post draws yet. We didn't know where the horses are going to be taking off at, but just hearing them talk about Optics EQ and the way that the race is projected to go and all the numbers there is just mind-boggling to watch them break that down. And you'll be able to kind of just get a sense, even if you're not like fully deep in the horse racing world, you'll be able to get a sense of kind of who they like and, what they are leaning towards there. And then, found a few other different spots to gather information. First of all, just watching the post draw, if you Google, Kentucky Derby post draw, the guy who reads off the names, he gives you a little bit of tidbit about each horse. The funny thing is when you hear him just talk about the name of the horse and not really getting into the resume of the horse, that's kind of your way of understanding like, hey, this horse might not be worth a damn. But even just watching that, you pick up a little tidbit along the way. Found some, I think there's a dermatology guy out there on YouTube. He gave a great 10-minute breakdown of right after the post draw, which was great. And then the racing guys, I think they have a podcast out there, definitely butchering their pod, but they had John White on as a guest. And that was a long podcast, tried to absorb some information there, as well as all the articles out there. Americasbestracing.net is a site that I was leaning on, and we're going to be using some of the quick screenshots from that as we get into this here on YouTube. But, just so much information out there. I'm just trying to gather it all up. So let's run through the field here as we are breaking down the 20 horses, the largest field in horse racing. And so let's get to it now. We're going to go through 1 through 20, and this is going to be pretty quick. I'll make this larger here if I can. And there we go. All right. So number one, starting against the rail, is Hit Show. He's going off at 30-1. The trainer is Brad Cox. Manny Franco is the jockey. Number two is Verifying, 15-1. Another Brad Cox horse. Has a little bit of Justify in him. This is pedigree. And Tyler Gaffaloin. I'm going to butcher some of these names, so I apologize. He's the number two horse. Number three, Two Phils. We're going to talk about Two Phils in a bit. 12-1. Larry Ravelli is the trainer, and Jareth Loveberry is the jockey on that one. Number four, Confidence Gain, going off at 20-1. And Keith DeSormo is the trainer. And we've got James Graham as the jockey on the number four horse. Number five, TAPIT TRICE. He's a big name. We're going to be talking about him. Todd Pletcher horse, going off at 5-1. And Luis Saez is the jockey there. Number six, KINGSBARNS. Another Todd Pletcher horse, going off at 12-1. Jose Ortiz is the jockey this week on KINGSBARNS. Reincarnate, number seven. He's going off at 50-1. And John Velasquez is the jockey on this one. And this is a situation where, if you remember, Bob Baffert suspended from 2 years ago because of some doping situation with his horses. So we've got Tim Yakatine as the trainer on that one, as he was for Baffert's horses last year. Number eight, Mage. He's going off at 15-1. There's definitely some ways you could say that, some debates on how to say that horse's name, but I'm pretty sure it's Mage. 15-1. And Gustavo Delgado is the trainer with, let's see, Javier Castellano. Jesus. 15-1 for Mage. Skinner is number 9. He's going off there. Juan Hernandez is the jockey on that one, and John Sheriffs is the trainer. Now, number 10 is an interesting one. It's Practical Move. He's going off at 10-1, and Tim Yakatine is the trainer there, but he's not taking over a Baffert horse. This was his to start. We'll talk about him in a bit. Ramon Vasquez is the jockey there. Number 11 is Disarm, 30-1. Steve Asmussen is the trainer. Joel Rosario is the jockey. Number 12, Jace's Road. It's a Brad Cox horse, 15-1 there. Flamant Giroux is the jockey on that one. Number 13 is Sun Thunder, Brian Hernandez Jr. with Kenny McPeak as the trainer on Sun Thunder, 30-1. 14, Angel of Empire, 8-1. Another Brad Cox horse. Flavian Pratt is the jockey there, so that's going to be one we talk about. And number 15, Forte, the morning line favorite, 3-1. Todd Pletcher and Irad Ortiz is the jockey. Number 16, Raise Cane, 50-1 horse there. Number 17 is DERMA SOTAGAKE, Japanese horse, and we'll be talking about that horse. He's going off at 10-1. Rocket Can Junior Alvarado is the jockey on this horse, going off at 30-1. Number 19 is Lord Miles, 30-1 there. Bill Mott is the trainer. And I mixed up their names there. Paco Lopez is the jockey on Lord Miles. And Saf Joseph Jr. is the trainer on him. And number 20, the last horse here, Contenor, 50-1. Long shot there for the 20 horse. So we will not really be talking about him. So that's the quick rundown. Again, butchered some names there. I apologize, but we are going to be getting into some specific horses here. And one of the things that is worth calling out now is the fact that we don't have, from all of the Kentucky Derby pre-race, the races on the road to the Derby, the way that they qualify and the way that they earn points to make the Derby, we don't have that typical pace-setting horse that's in the field this week. Okay, now we do have horses that can be labeled pace setters, but in the road to the Derby, they haven't really been that style horse. They've run, there have been horses that have run from gate to the wire, of course, led the whole way because they're just that strong. But as far as, in the past, when Emily last year, she was on the show, she predicted exactly how the race was going to go down from the gate all the way to the first turn or two. And it was because we have these specific horses that like to get out front. They like to lead, and then they manage things from that point. The real pace setters didn't make the show Now, if we get a couple scratches, I think there is a horse or two that's kind of waiting in the wings down at Churchill Downs, trying to get that opportunity if somebody gets scratched. So if they join the show, then that might set the tone a little bit differently. But the fact remains, going off this weekend, we're going to see some horses thrown into positions that they haven't really been in. Horses that need to lead. Somebody's going to have to lead the race going into the first turn, and it might be someone who hasn't been in that position before. So another interesting tidbit about this race and how it's a little different than what we've seen in the past. So let's get into some of these horses specifically now, and we're going to have to start with Forte. All right, because he's a Todd Pletcher horse. He is the odds-on favorite to win this weekend at the Kentucky Derby. He's going off from the number 15 spot. And again, the visual here, I'm stealing those stats that you see on the screen there from America's bestracing.net. So thank you to them. 7 starts for this horse lifetime since he broke maiden, and 7 starts and 6 wins he's got. So just unbelievable numbers there. And there's, good reason. And as a 2-year-old, he was the 2022 horse of the year. So of course, if we're coming into 2023 Kentucky Derby, you got to go with the 2-year-old horse of the year. He's going to be making a name for himself. He's going to be up there as far as the odds. And of course, in this case, it's the favorite. So he needs a clean trip. If he gets a clean trip, he could be a very tough horse to beat just because of how strong he is and the resume that he has. 6 wins out of 7 races, just, truly unbelievable there. So they have some cons though with this horse. Now listening to Emily and John and then some of the other podcasts and the articles that have been written, this is a horse that just hasn't really been improving, more so maintaining than anything else. Now, the big thing with this horse was in the Florida Derby, okay, because Mage, the horse that's running in the 8th spot this race in the Derby, in the Florida Derby, Mage was out front. And Forte just blew by Mage. And that made it look visually as if Forte was just unbelievable. Like, holy shit. Like, look at this horse. Look how fast he is. But from what everybody's kind of saying, this is more so a situation of Mage just running out of gas. So it was more so like a little bit of an optical illusion that, Forte is really dominant and more so just Mage, losing it there. So that was the situation there. And in the Fountain of Youth, he ran his best race, but it wasn't exactly like mind blowing. So he's a horse that if he gets out front, you're not confident that he's going to be able to close the deal from everything that I'm reading. It's more so you're crossing your fingers that he's able to hold on more so than anything else. And as a 3-1 favorite, that isn't really my vibe. So, that's the skinny there on Forte. And it'll be interesting to see how, as that sort of information comes out, as we get closer to race day, if he maybe drops a little bit and some of these other horses take a little bit more money on. So Forte, Todd Pletcher horse, great resume, great in 2022. But for me, at that value, I don't know if I'm taking him to win the race. We're going to talk at the end as to, some picks that I have out there at this point in time. So let's move to the next horse. And this is another Todd Pletcher horse. This is TAPIT TRICE. He's the 5 horse. And in 5 starts for TAPIT TRICE, he's 4 wins, 0 second places, and 1 third place. So he's 5-1 to win this race. And he's, obviously the second favorite. People love the gray horse. And we haven't had a gray horse win since Giacomo in 2005. And, everyone, I don't know if this is just me, but I don't like the gray horses. But when you're reading these articles, people just rave about how beautiful this horse is. I don't know. Maybe I'm just so far on the outside that it's just not my thing. But there are definitely some other horses visually that I'm like, man, those guys are badass. The gray horses, they don't do it for me. But TAPIT TRICE was the most expensive horse in this race. So when they, went off at the buy, he was the most expensive one, and they tapped Todd Pletcher to get it done for them. So he has a tendency to get off to a bad start. All right, but he's kind of developing as a stalker. So he's got that strong pedigree for a long race. And, in fact, the Belmont kind of sounds like it's more his situation than anything. It could set up better. So, if he really grows into it, and he gets this done, we might have a chance at a Triple Crown just because the Belmont is, that longer race. And that's really what it seems like he's starting to develop as. He's got a great stride. He held off a long push from verifying in the Bluegrass Stakes. So the question is he able to hold on in this field, this 20 horse field with the best of the best? Is he able to keep it together there? Some say he's not really a complete horse yet. He's kind of like in the race itself, kind of looking around, and not really as focused. And if they're able to kind of keep that horse focused on what's ahead, then we will potentially see a really good race out of the 5 horse. Now, Saez is staying with him. They're on a 4 race win streak. So the thing about him is, and you can't live bet this race because it's only like 90 seconds long, but if he gets off to a good start, you got to look out. If they get out there to a situation that they are comfortable with, not leading the race right off the bat, but if they're out there, they get a clean break, that could be good things for anyone who's betting on the 5 horse. So TAPIT TRICE, number 5. And who knows, maybe throw a little 5 horse, 5 car parlay situation. I don't know what book would take that, but hey, it could be a number 5 weekend. So let's move to the next horse here that we have up there. And this is Practical Move. I mentioned him earlier. Ramon Vasquez. And this is a Tim Yakutin horse. 7 starts, 4 wins, 1 second place, and 2 third places. He's going off at 10-1 from the number 10 spot. Now, this is the horse that I mentioned when Yakutin was taken over as a trainer for the Baffert horses. This is not a Baffert horse. He's had this horse from the beginning. So what kind of a story would that be, right? If he, took over last year, that's kind of how he made more of a name for himself in the Derby. And now he goes in and wins, even though he still has a Baffert horse in the race elsewhere. He goes and wins with this one that he's been training with for the whole time. I mean, that would be pretty impressive if he was able to get that done. So this could be like the strangest horse in the field. We got some knocks on this guy. He's had some really great trips, but in small fields. So when you're looking at the data kind of overall, it may not necessarily, pan out. You're looking at these smaller fields and he's kicking them to the side. Yeah, sure. But in a 20 horse field, there's definitely a question mark of how a horse like this would be able to react. But he's been very consistent. He's got great tactical speed. And here's a stat that came from one of those podcasts I was listening to. Of all 16 prep races in the Kentucky Derby that gone into the road to the Derby, he has the best and second best times. So that tells you, I mean, this dude, we mentioned how he's consistent. He's definitely fast. He won the Santa Anita Derby, beating Skinner and Mandarin Hero. So, Skinner obviously in this race, but he doesn't mind traffic, which is great because in a 20 horse field, even though, the horses that he's faced against so far, it's been smaller fields. In those races, he's been involved in some traffic. You better get used to that in the Kentucky Derby. So the fact that he has shown that he doesn't really mind it, that could help in a little bit of a crowded field here. And let's see here, trying to take a second here to look. Now, the note that I have written down is that he has a very high likelihood of being in the position to make the move at the end. And if he's there at about 1.16 miles, I mean, he's going to be licking his chops because that's the type of horse that he is. He's a stalker. If he's at that point at 1.16 miles, look out. I mean, this is a horse that will absolutely be strong down the stretch if he's in that situation. So Practical Move is definitely one at 10-1 to keep your eyes on to win the race and keep in your exotics for sure. So that is Practical Move, Tim Yakutin. Now, next horse up. This is a Brad Cox horse, and it's Angel of Empire. It's ridden by Flavian Pratt. He's going off at 8-1, 6 starts and 4 wins, 1 second place finish. He's going off from the 14th spot. He has shown improvement over his last 3 races as a 3-year-old. His second place finish at Oaklawn Park was a good one, and we're going to talk about that one actually in just a second. But he won the Rising Star and most recently won the Arkansas Derby that had a pretty decent field, and he put up over 100 points there. So that's a, big situation there, a big feather in the cap, his feather in his Kentucky Derby hat there, to really ride on there. So looking at the situation, though, he hasn't had this much time in between starts. Last start was April 1st, going to May 6th, but he's definitely, it's a long layoff for him, but he's definitely in form. That is for sure. He's visually impressive was one of the terms that somebody said about him at the Arkansas Derby, where he's able to run off the pace and, really come and stalk them down and get a good run. He has shown the ability to battle through the field. He's shown the ability to get a good run with his jockey there. So that is something that really gets my attention. I mean, Angel of Empire is one that a lot of people have been talking about to win the race. And one of the things you got to look at is the way the trainers are talking about their horses. So Brad Cox has multiple horses in this race. But at that one race that I talked about, he finished second earlier in this Road to the Derby situation, or this schedule, Oaklawn. He finished second. And Brad Cox had the horse that finished first in that race, and all he could talk about was this horse, how happy he was that he improved, and how this horse is setting up to be, perfectly in sync by the time the Kentucky Derby rolls around. And I think that means a lot. Like, you really have to take that into consideration, the way the trainers feel about the horse. So he feels that he will be great at this length. And for me, this is a horse that you might want to pick to win the race at 8-1. So Brad Cox is, kind of favoring that horse as a trainer over someone who just won. I mean, that tells a big story there. Here's a situation. All right. The number 17, DERMA SOTAGAKE. This is the horse from Japan. Christophe Lemaire is the jockey on this one. He's been the jockey for the whole time here. This horse is going off at 10-1, and Hidetaka Otanashi is the trainer on this one. Now, this horse has 8 starts, 4 wins, and 2 third-place finishes. It's going off at the number 17 slot, so we will talk about that in a second. But it's a Japanese horse. It's the same story every year. Will this be the year? Randy Moss, the OG Randy Moss. All right, my buddies and I always talk about Randy Moss. It's Randy Moss season. Horse racing, Randy Moss absolutely loves this horse. I mean, really is jockeying this horse, no pun intended here. And, a lot of positive things that you can say about this horse. He won the UAE Derby in dominant fashion, like by 5 lengths, just wasn't even close. He's the son of Mind Your Biscuits, who was a strong horse in his time. And they're calling this the best chance the Japanese have ever had to win the Derby. His UAE time, and there was a Baffert horse in that race, by the way, but his UAE time is comparable to some of the best times from the United States prep races heading into this race. So you're saying, like, apples to apples, like time versus time, he has, competition for these guys. He's there. So this is a horse that might be more of a pace setter. All right. We talked about how this field kind of lacks that. Well, he is someone that might be able to jump out in front and lead a little bit off the break. So you got to watch for that. And that's really kind of what went down in Dubai. I mean, he took off and he was just gone. He led from, the start to the finish. So tactical racer. He's got a perfect run style. He adapts really well to the situation that he's in. All positive things about this horse. 10-1, pretty good value for that resume, right? But the thing is, I mean, this horse is, he's got to break a lot of jinxes. All right. Japan has never won the Kentucky Derby. They are going after it. like crazy. And the winner of the UAE Derby has never won the Kentucky Derby. One of them, I don't know if it's the UAE winner or Japan. They're 0 for 18. So it just gives you a sense of like how long we've been going at this here. So that's something. And then on top of those two jinxes, this poor horse draws the 17 stall, which is never won the Kentucky Derby. So if this horse wins, he will be smashing all sorts of jinxes left and right. The Japanese jinx, the UAE jinx, this number 17 jinx. Can he do it? And I always get sucked into these Japanese horses because of how strong their resumes are. This year, I don't know, man. It's just a lot of things to go right, a lot of things to fall your way in order to cash on this horse. So maybe I would throw him in. I'm going to lay out kind of an exacta at the end of this. Maybe I would throw him into something there like a trifecta box or whatever. But I don't know if I could take him to win. 10-1, just too many things working against him from the universe. That's tough. But the resume is strong and the horse is definitely very solid if you're just kind of taking that stuff out of it. The human element to me, though, just knowing that is tough to overcome. So let's get into maybe a little bit of a longer shot. I've heard a couple people talk about this horse, and some people are really strong on him, some people aren't. So this is KINGSBARNS. Jose Ortiz is the jockey. Todd Fletcher is the trainer. And he has 3 starts and 3 wins. And he's going off from the number 6 spot. He's 12-1 to win the race. And he is a total wild card. Some think he is worth the look. Others, if you're looking through, articles that people have put out, tossing him right away, which I don't think you should toss this horse right away at all. But there are people doing it. So that's, there are definitely reasons for it, as we're going to touch on all of them. But KINGSBARNS, number 6 horse, he's definitely a little bit of a head scratcher here. So first and foremost, we got to call out the curse of Apollo, because he did not run as a 2-year-old. And that was always a thing. The last horse to not run as a 2-year-old and then win the Kentucky Derby was Apollo. But that was shattered by Justify in 2018. So that's kind of making it a little bit more reasonable. Like, okay, we just talked about those jinxes from the horse previous. For KINGSBARNS, you can look at Justify because not only did he win the Kentucky Derby, but he won the whole Triple Crown. So he's only run 3 races, but he won all 3 of them. And his speed numbers, they were very, I don't know, bit of a knock. Emily kind of had him as a downgrading horse. He's got some perfect runs out there. And last time out, it's kind of going to be tough to replicate that perfect run. Another knock that they had is he has not had the same jockey. They just don't have him sticking with him there. Pletcher keeps moving them all over to ride with some of the other horses. And this guy, we're getting Jose Ortiz on him there, as opposed to some of his stablemates who maybe they're saying, might be stronger than him. And that's why they're giving him the other jockeys. Or is it because he's the third of the bunch? TAPIT, TRICE, and Forte, obviously, as far as the odds are concerned, are higher up. So we don't have the same jockey horse relationship that we've seen in some of these other horses. But, we'll see how that works out for KINGSBARNS. So that's some of the knocks against this horse. But let's talk about some of the positives. He is going to be a bit of a pace setter, a bit of a presser. All right. In the Louisiana Derby, he ran 1 mile and 3/16, easily won. Stamina did not look to be an issue in that race. And going to that one podcast that I was listening to, John White from the Santa Anita racetrack, he was saying that this horse, he could go out and finish 18th, or he could win this race and has potential of being an absolute superstar. If he were to win this race, there's a potential that this is a horse that could be set up to win the Triple Crown, which is what everyone wants, right? We all want that. So we're trying to find the right horse to do that. So if this horse has that type of potential and that stride, so it's a bit of a mixed bag, right? We've got the numbers, the speed numbers and rankings down a little bit on this horse, but what we did see, the stamina not really being an issue at the Louisiana Derby, really one running away. So if he can get that perfect ride, look out. You know what I mean? I keep saying that about a few different horses, but everyone is going to be trying to run their own race. Now, this is where strategy kind of comes into play because other horses around him at the start are kind of expecting this horse to kind of take off and go and set the pace for everyone else. And is that beneficial to those other horses? Or is that beneficial to KINGSBARNS? Because maybe that's exactly what he wants. Maybe he has the stamina to be able to get out, break well, and lead the race and not die out at the end because his stamina is up there. So can he hang on to get the job done? Whereas everybody else is kind of expecting him to set the pace. We're going to ride, third, fourth, fifth, and then make our move late. Will it be too late if KINGSBARNS is the one out there setting the pace? So that's KINGSBARNS 12-1. Now I got a quick horse I want to throw in here. This is Juan Hernandez. This is Skinner, number 9 horse, going off at 20-1. Complete long shot or longer shot compared to these other horses that we're talking about. 6 races. He's got 1 win and 3 third-place finishes. I'm bringing him up because this is more of a long shot that you might want to throw into some of your exotics. He's a long shot who might be able to hit the board. He's the son of Curlin, who was a 2-time horse of the year. You might remember Curlin. And he finished 3rd in the San Felipe Stakes, and he rallied down the stretch in the Santa Anita Derby to be part of a blanket finish. Both of those races were won by his, I guess, rival, you could say, Impractical Move, who won both of those races. So they are just so happen to be starting next to each other, 9th and 10th spot, which is pretty funny when you think about it. These guys are just like battling left and right. And, here they are starting right next to each other in the biggest race of their lives. But when you're looking at it, it seems as if he's been getting stronger. He's kind of been the bridesmaid, never the bride kind of deal. But to me, I don't think this is a horse that has the threat to win the race, but I think you want to include him. If you're getting frisky, throwing some exacta boxes together, you're throwing some trifexas together, I think he's a horse that might be able to get up there and hit the board as a longer shot. So 20-1 on Skinner. So now we move to the horse of the podcast. Okay. This horse, his name is 2 Phils. He's 12-1 to win this race. Jareth Loveberry is the jockey. Larry Ravelli is the trainer. And 2 Phils, for obvious reasons, is the Full Tank with Phil podcast pick. No ifs and buts about it. We're going to, get into this here. But he's got 8 starts, 4 wins, 1 second place, and 1 third place finish. So 6 of the 8 times hitting the board here for this 12-1 shot. And Emily from Optics EQ, guest from last year, she's been kind of high on this horse from what I can tell from her Twitter feed and what they talked about on the Kentucky Derby preview, where saying he was the only horse above par in their ratings, which is pretty interesting compared to all the other Derby horses. His connections are here for the first time. They're from Chicago. And, maybe that gives you a little bit of pause, right? Because you look at all these other names, Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher, Bob Baffert. Obviously he's not here, but he is here kind of deal. Like these names are just synonymous with the Derby. Well, here we got a new trainer, Larry Ravelli, coming in from Chicago. He hit the board in 4 straight graded stakes races. The downside is, the dominating victory that this horse had was on synthetic surface. So that's really, when you listen to these talking heads, go at it on the podcasts and, the YouTube videos and such, anybody who wants to knock this horse says right away, synthetic, that's a fake surface. Of course, he had blazing speed out there. I think his numbers are like better than everybody in the, or his number from that race was like the fastest of everyone in the Derby, but it's an immediate asterisk. It's not a real racetrack. So we're going to toss this horse right out. You haven't really found too many people talking about this horse in a positive light, but I kind of like that. 12-1. Maybe he's going to stay there or maybe be better odds for the gambler in this one to potentially hit the board. His speed metrics overall are a little bit lower than the other contenders, even though he had that one blazing fast race on the synthetic surface. But he does have a dirt win here at Churchill. So he won on the dirt track at Churchill Downs in the Street Sense Stakes. And another thing about this horse is his jockey has been with him the whole way. He's a try-hard runner. This horse is just speaking to me at 12-1. And I was able to see an interview. I don't know if this was at the post draw, maybe, or maybe right after that, but the trainer was getting interviewed talking about, the transition from Chicago to Churchill Downs. How are things going? Is the horse adapting well? And the interview was just like exactly what I wanted to hear, right? He said, yeah, things are going good. This is a horse that he's been eating well. He eat a full meal, and he sleeps. He likes to sleep during the day, so we just let him. He sleeps really well at night. Get some good workouts in. I'm thinking to myself, you're talking about a guy who's just eating till his stomach's full, sleeps during the day, sleeps at night, maybe gets a workout here or there, and gets good scores on the workout. This horse is me. Like I am this horse. So love the story from the trainer. I love how comfortable it sounds like he is. That's what we were saying. You got to go with the stuff that the trainers are saying. Obviously, they're not going to talk to the press in a negative way, but just those candid interviews, those little things, I think mean a lot to me as the gambler. So this obviously is a horse that I think is funny to take for the name purpose. I mean, I'll tell you this, right? I am Phil. I have a son. We call him by his middle name, but he's Phil the fourth. All right. My dad's Junior. My grandfather's hat is what I'm wearing right now. So we're channeling, my grandpa, his straw hat here. 2 Phils. I got 2 Phils in my house right now. Me and my son go hang out with my dad. We got 2 Phils there. What's this horse number in this race? 3. I'm Phil the third. Like, it's just too many things talking to me here. But on top of the fun stuff there, this horse's resume is worth it for the position, that he's going off at 12-1 there. So I think, you want to include him in some exactas and in your exotics. But I already took him, when I was down in South Carolina, I had the Bovada account pumping. I took him. He was 12-1 then, got him at 12-1 there. So I'm pretty happy about that. So those are the horses. I guess we broke down about 7 horses total there. So that's the breakdown. And I hope that was helpful to those out there who aren't really familiar with the Derby, trying to get acquainted with some of these guys and, where they stand coming up to Saturday. Now you got to pay attention because we will have potentially a horse get scratched. Maybe 2 horses get scratched. It's going to change the odds a little bit. You want to pay attention to some of the workouts. I would just say, follow Emily. She goes by May Emily on Twitter. Jim Sanis, who's been a guest on the NASCAR betting preview show. I saw he put out a podcast this week with a guest from Churchill Downs. I need to listen to that. I have not heard that yet. Saw that right before I started recording. So I'm excited to listen to that podcast as well. So just, keep your ears peeled. Keep your ears to the ground there. The way we get into it. Now, let's talk about some picks because I know that's why we're here. I got a visual up here talking about an exacta, and I'm going to go now. I'm going to have a bunch of different plays that I make this weekend, but the one that I'm calling out here for the podcast, I'm going to take Practical Move as my winner, as the cornerstone of the exacta bet, and then I'm going to box up a number of other guys here. So TAPIT, TRICE, Verifying, who we didn't really talk about, but he seems like a horse, the number 2 horse. He's got Justify pedigree. He's a horse that could hit the board. I don't want to get beat by a horse like that. Forte, the number 15, he's the odds-on favorite, and Angel of Empire. So those guys are all boxed up with Practical Move as my winner. That's the one pick that I'm throwing out there this week for the podcast. If I come up with, any more that are worth sharing, I will do that. Just know, I'm going to be wheeling and dealing with my money a number of different ways. But I feel strong about this Practical Move horse to potentially win the race. He's going off at 10-1. Now, if you want to have a little fun, I saw the Derbytologist kind of do something similar to this. Exacta box, a $2 exacta box. You got $40 to play with. Let's throw 5 horses together. And these are all horses that I feel, some are longer shots, some are the favorites. Practical Move, 10 horse. Angel of Empire, the 14 horse. KINGSBARNS, longer shot. 2 Phils, longer shot. And TAPIT, TRICE, the 5 horse. throw them into a $2 exacta box, cost you $40, and let's see if two of these horses can go out and get it done for us. I think this is a fun way to play it. So you kind of budget yourself and pick your best horses to do it there. Now, in doing this, I know that I'm leaving myself exposed to some of the longer shots, the 50-1 shots, the 30-1 shot that's out there. And yeah, I'm going to let the week kind of come to me a little bit, see how the word is at the workouts at Churchill throughout the week, and maybe dip into a little bit of stuff there. But as far as the fun we're having this week on the podcast, these are the picks that I'm comfortable throwing out there because I really have liked what I've seen on these horses' resumes because we broke down all of those guys that you see on the screen. So the exacta box, $2 exacta box, Practical Move, Angel of Empire, KINGSBARNS, Two Fills, and TAPIT, TRICE. So that's going to do it. I hope that was informative. I hope that you're excited for the Derby. You're going to go out, get some mint juleps going, get some buddies together, maybe get a little pool going, do the random draw out of a hat in addition to, signing up, if you haven't already, for some of the books that handle the sports, the horse racing, because it is a separate entity. DraftKings is new this year. You have to download a separate app. Same with FanDuel or Twin Spires if your state allows it. So definitely give that a look if you're kind of newer to this subject. But if you don't, it's always fun to just throw names out of a hat, throw $20 in a piece, and you see who you get. You get what you get, and you don't get upset. So Kentucky Derby, really looking forward to it. My only hope, right, as opposed to, in addition, rather, to winning some of these bets that we're talking about, my real hope is that the winner of this race races in the Preakness, because we've been kind of screwed the last few years of not seeing that potential. I want to see the Preakness with some excitement. So if we get that, hopefully we'll be able to maybe snag Emily, give her a little bit more of a heads up, and have her come on and talk about how things went. We'll see. We'll put a pin in that. But I hope everyone has fun this weekend gambling on the Derby, and I hope that this was helpful to you as maybe a newer gambler and to the horse racing world, and hope it makes it interesting for you.